Hello, welcome to this second in the series of videos I'm producing to introduce the ideas of Marx and Marxism. In the first video, I said that a theme running right the way through Marx's work was that capitalism was anti-human. At the heart of this critique of capitalism was a concept of Marx's that I'm going to introduce today. That is the concept of alienation. It was first developed in 1844 in the economic and philosophic manuscripts that he wrote at that time when he was only 26. But it continues as a central theme in Marx's work all the way through to Capital and beyond. Now, to grasp the importance of alienation as a concept, it is necessary to see that Marx used it in a way that was different from the way in which it's used in everyday language and indeed in academic sociology. In everyday language, in everyday discourse, alienation means a feeling of being estranged or put off. I was alienated from the group because of so-and-so's rudeness towards me. Or I felt alienated in this situation because I was being excluded in some way or other. In sociology, it means something similar, a feeling of isolation or loneliness or powerlessness, or that life or that work is meaningless. Either way, both in everyday language and in sociology, it's presented as primarily a feeling that people have, a state of mind. And it's often used particularly to explain really dreadful behaviour, the behaviour of somebody who might be a psychopathic criminal or something like that, to explain that they're said to be alienated. Now, in Marx, alienation, the feeling of alienation may be a consequence, but it is not the heart of the matter. In Marx, alienation is first and foremost a material fact of life. In fact, in his 1844 manuscripts, he describes it, I quote, as an actual economic fact. And the fact that he's talking about, and again I'm quoting him, is that the object which labour produces, labour's product, confronts it as something alien, as a power independent of the producer. The worker is related to the product of his labour as to an alien product. And therefore, the more the worker spends himself, the more powerful the alien objective world becomes, which he creates over and against himself. So this is a material relationship. Workers are alienated from the products of their labour, right? And people come to be dominated, not just feel dominated, but actually dominated and damaged by the products of their own labour. So if you wanted a concrete example of alienation in today's world, it's not just the deranged mass murderer who shoots everybody in their community or tries to shoot everybody in their community somewhere in America or something like that. They may indeed be deeply alienated, but a concrete example of what Marx is talking about would actually be climate change. Quite literally in climate change, the products of human labour, namely greenhouse gases, come to dominate and damage human beings. And this is why Marx writes, the worker becomes all the poorer the more wealth he produces. The more his production increases in power and size, the worker becomes an ever cheaper commodity, the more commodities he creates. So it is this actual economic relationship that he's talking about. But then he goes further. He says that if the worker is alienated from the product of their labour, that can only be because they are actually alienated in the process of performing that labour itself, because the product of labour is only the result of the action of production. The product is the summary, as it were, of the act of producing. This is what he writes. Till now, we have been considering the estrangement, the alienation of the worker, only in one of its aspects, the worker's relationship to the products of his labour. But the estrangement is manifested not only in the result, but in the act of production, within the producing activity itself. How could the worker come to face the product of his activity as a stranger, were it not that in the very act of production he was estranging himself from himself? The product is, after all, but the summary of the activity of production. If then the product of labour is alienation, production itself must be active alienation. Now that can sound a bit complicated and abstract. It is the way he's putting it, but what he means is something that we're all very familiar with, and that is that workers, all of us, are forced to sell our labour power, to make over